screen sharing capacity?
Good morning, everybody. Before I hand it over to our awesome lead faculty, Alison Rollins, just wanted to do a little schedule update. It also, just to let you know, it is officially day 4 of the residency. It's Saturday, just to let all of you remind you, it is Saturday. Today looks a lot like yesterday. We have Allison and Jess aren't. Jess is a guest artist and a future faculty member. Will be reading this evening. That will be that's tonight at 7. And I wanted to start reminding for those students who are moving forward into fall semester, your pairing forms are due on Sunday night. So that's tomorrow night. So if you need support around that, feel free to email me. And then I want to quickly announce before Allison starts talking about Gabrielle Civil. Gabrielle Civil, as some of you may know, we always do a midterm, beyond the residency class. Allison actually did it last spring's class. Janice Lee did a class in the fall, and Gabrielle Civil is going to be doing our fall class. And that's going to be also giving a reading and a performance. So just wanted to plant that seed. But yes, without further ado, Allison, take it away.
Okay, I also can get co-hosting abilities on my end. I think.
Oh, yeah. I can do it.
Okay.
Allison, I'm gonna make you co-host real quick. Thank you, Tia.
Perfect. All right. Good morning, greetings, peace. I sent you all a deck of the slideshow in both PowerPoint and PDF form last night because for those of y'all that are farther along in the program, I have what I'll call just grandiose ways of thinking that do not fit inside time and space, especially often in 60-minute slots. So this talk is going to have kind of multiple components or parts. The first is going to be a contextualization of my foray this past school year into other forms of art practice, including performance art. Then walk you through some sections of Gabrielle Civil's Swallow the Fish that are really, really meaningful to me and I think pertinent for our residency time. And then the last section is for use maybe during your workshop time, post-residency, for you to reach out to me and check in terms of how you are connecting this to your life art practice. I have a really busy summer, so hopefully in the fall, like later on, but I'd love to hear, I hope this is just kind of scratching the surface or planting some seeds. And then as that continues to flourish or blossom, you'll continue to keep me abreast of your process. So I'm going to screen share. All right, so the name of the talk then is Swallow the Fish, Creative Writing as Performance Art. And I'm going to start with a little bit of context and background. So this past school year, I did my first of 2 years in an MFA program at Brown in the poetry track. And I took a course in the spring called Foreign Home. And this was described as an interdisciplinary workshop in the literary arts department. So I went into it thinking we're going to probably be making things across genre or not necessarily genre specific. It's not a poetry workshop, but I don't know exactly what to expect or what that means, but it's supposed to be interdisciplinary. The class is taught by a Brown professor and writer named Talia Field. And she is kind of, has this legendary status or ethos that surrounds her. This class, everyone's like, you must take this class, you must work with this professor. You're going to be changed after you do the class. Your practice is going to be never the same. So there was all this kind of energy and mythos surrounding this incredible experience is supposed to happen, and then you're going to come out the other end a different person, which was intriguing, sometimes cult-like vibes, sometimes very kind of daunting in terms of expectations. On the first day of class, we went around the room and we had to talk about how we described ourselves as artists, writers, and then Talia would be like, okay, J, Alejandro, V, you can't take this class. I don't think this will be meaningful. So it was this kind of really weird, rigorous process, or people would just kind of drop or be like, I don't want to take this class. I'm not going to come. So it was a really kind of mystical, odd, obscure, mercurial type environment for this class to begin with. And the first question we were asked was, what is your home art writing practice? So I asked this of each of you all as well. Some people are entering the program with backgrounds in photography, for example. And so this is their first time pivoting into creative writing or learning about creative writing formally. Some people are entering the program already having self-published or written a novel, so they see themselves as fiction writers. So I write across genres and blend genres, but at my heart, I guess my home practice, my first book published is in poetry. So if you could just jot down what you would describe or see as your home art writing practice. You're not getting it tattooed to you. It doesn't mean that you can't, switch sides or whatnot, but what you see is kind of your home practice. All right, so after we identified our home practice, we were asked to make two different lists. So on a piece of paper, you were asked to make a list of art practices, subjects, like jobs or fields, areas of study that you particularly feel drawn to, attracted to, that intrigue you, that are of interest to you, that you've always kind of had a desire. It could be a hidden or a very public desire to do or be affiliated with, or in your wildest dreams, if you could do this, like what are those types of areas that you're drawn to or you feel some type of tie to. And then in contrast to that, another list of art practices, subjects, etc., that you find very intimidating, that you're afraid of. Sometimes that fear can be based on failure, or it could be based on just unknowing or feeling like you're not the correct subject position to do that type of work or something. Ooh, girl, we lost the earring. She doesn't want to be on. We're going to leave her off. Things that you kind of dislike. So these two lists are in contrast to each other. And there are two rules about these lists. And the first rule is the items on the list do not have to be art or writing related. So for example, if you're like, I've always been into like the garbage industry, I've always wanted to follow around the people that collect trash or work at a recycling facility or something, that's fair game. So it doesn't have to be art related. And then the second rule is the items on these lists must be things that you have little to no prior experience with. So it shouldn't be something you've taken a class in or that you're an expert in or that you've dabbled in before, like things that you don't already have experience in. So I'll just give a couple of minutes if you want to start to populate these two lists. And I'm going to show you examples of my classmates and mine as well. But So take another minute, and hopefully by the end of my talk, the end of today, you'll have like a whole page of things for these categories. All right, so on the left-hand side is my list from class. I said my home practice is poetry. So these are areas where I had desire and curiosity. So falconry, which is actually a little bit of cheating, so I didn't end up choosing this because I do have some experience in falconry, but linguistics, mycology, the study of mushrooms, magic, like magicians, textile art, weaving, performance art, preachers or spiritual leaders, survivalists, which was also kind of cheating because I have some experience in that, stand-up comedian, origami, podiatry. Secret fact about me, I love watching YouTube videos about podiatry. Veterinarian, taxidermy, butcher, marine biologist, and sex worker. So those were areas where I had a desire or some type of curiosity. Then for my fear, intimidation side, I had mathematician, a translator, shout out to translators, but it scares me, physicist, metal worker, nursing, calligraphy, a funeral home staff person, a hunter, a volleyball player, a navigator, meaning someone who provides directions or is very good at like directional facilitation in terms of not getting lost. An elevator repairer. I don't like small spaces, and elevators are scary to me. So the people that build those, put them in, repair them. People that have the ability to sight read music and sing as they're sight reading it, like sing live while reading music, drawing. And what I mean by this is people that can draw realistically, like draw still lifes and it looks like the actual thing they're drawing. Never good at that. And then mechanics, like things having to do with car repair or automobile type work. All right, so your next step in your process, post my talk, is for you to choose 2 areas that are going to be contextualized as foreign to you. So one of these is going to come from your desire, curiosity list, and one of these is going to come from your fear, intimidation list. And to give you some examples of people that were in my class, there was an undergraduate film student, so their home practice was film, and they chose the areas of hospice, which for them went on to include like grief counseling work and also hospice in like the formal medical structure, and light fixtures. So they were interested in light making. I don't know how to say it. Then there was an MFA student in playwriting, and they chose toy making and memory. People that learn how to memorize like a lot. There's all these type of memory contests. Learn how to memorize a large amount of information. There were 2 other poetry students. One of them chose boxing and tarot. The other poetry student chose world records and scent, so the sensory process of smell. There were 2 fiction students in the class. One of them chose naming, so the process across cultures of choosing names, nicknames. There's some cultures that name people something different after they've passed away. So the process for naming, some people have, in Christianity, you might have a name for your confirmation, like the choosing of names, and electronic music. The other fiction student chose indigo, so the process of dying, and art installation or exhibition work. And then there was me, who chose performance art and metal work as my 2 areas. All right, so then there were these 3 elements of the class that I'm going to break down that I found, I did indeed find like really transformative, and I think are helpful and meaningful in terms of, artistic practice. So the first of these tasks which during the scope of the semester was shrouded in anxiety, confusion, intense pressure. I never cried, but often a feeling of wanting to cry, just have breakdowns. So we were asked to make and present multiple finished or complete works to class. So we had our first class, we developed these categories, we picked our categories, and then it was like, okay, next week, next Tuesday, bring to class a finished metalwork piece. So I'm sitting there like I'm on a grad student budget. I don't even know what I'm going to eat today. I don't know how to buy, I don't know how I'm supposed to make metal. I don't have access to steel. I don't know the prices. I have no idea how I'm supposed to work in metal by next week. So, what the heck? So you're sitting in this place of kind of, I have no idea how to do this thing. And we had particular rules that governed our presentations of our pieces. So one of those rules was we weren't allowed to offer any apologies. So you can't say, oh, I'm sorry, this isn't done, or I'm sorry, I didn't have time to get copper, so it came out. No apologies, no preamble, no excuses, no explanation. You couldn't walk in and say, oh, this is gonna be a toaster when I finish it, but I didn't know how to, no explanations. It couldn't be a work in progress, and it couldn't be a rough draft. So that required us to kind of stand behind what we made in a level of seriousness, in a level of not apology, and also for me, a level of fear. That was like a very high then level of fear factor operating. Talia also told us that we could lie, cheat, and steal, but then didn't give any explanation about what that actually meant. So that was completely open to interpretation. So then I began to think, okay, if I can cheat or steal, like maybe I can go on eBay or like go to a mechanic, like try to go on Etsy and try to buy some type of metalwork that somebody else did, get it here by Tuesday and bring it into class and say I made it or something, or like try to just glue with a hot glue gun some things that like I might have to try to find a workaround because I'm being given the room to lie, cheat, and steal somehow. And then the third component was over the course of the semester, we really were genuinely trying to learn these things. So it was developing a course of action for ourselves in terms of how we were going to learn these practices. So the class had no release syllabus, no book, no, these are the books to buy that we're going to cover, no, here's what we're doing each day, like no structure. So it was up to us to develop a course of action in terms of finding people that we could shadow or kind of volunteer with or work alongside, determining how we were going to gain hands-on experience or exposure. Sometimes that was finding books in a library or watching like online YouTube tutorials or asking for help or gathering resources and materials, sometimes ad hoc, sometimes garbage dumpster diving, sometimes going to the architecture department and trying to see if I could steal things from architecture students or so. So it created this kind of scrappy, if you will, or hustler type mentality in terms of non-traditional learning. Like how am I going to build a curriculum, a structure for progress that is not formal or necessarily attached to my teacher or the institution or whatever the context of the class is in terms of learning in that way, if that makes sense. The second component is conducting research and making 2 research presentations. So I know in Alejandro's talk yesterday, he referenced research, and I appreciate that he referenced it with a tone of excitement and passion and collaboration and engagement, which oftentimes I think sometimes gets taken out of us through learning or formal education. And so for each of the 2 areas that you choose, I would like for you to begin a research process, which I'll call like a labor of love or an investment of love, in terms of discovering information. So this might include learning about the history of the field, learning about important figures in the field, controversies in the field, learning the jargon of that particular field, like what are the terms that people know and use frequently in that area or practice. And then lastly, which I'm going to show you an example kind of all of these, is we were asked to make a three-way dictionary. And so this is a process I'm also going to probably continue to do till I get tired of it, I guess. So you're going to make a list of terms in your two foreign fields and home fields, and then draw or weave connections across them. And I'm going to show you an example of mine and what I mean by that. So if you have a column for poetry, a column for performance art, and a column for metalwork, what are words that you can build connective tissue across conceptually or metaphorically that show a through line across three seemingly different or disparate areas? Okay. All right, so one of the phenomenons that I'm grateful for that this activity or exercise made me think about is it wasn't till very later in my adult life that I considered myself a poet or was able to imagine myself a poet or able to maybe define myself as a poet. So in high school, all of my studies leading up to college, the only Black poet I was really made aware of or given a collection of poetry about was Langston Hughes. So I love Langston Hughes, but it was like, this is a person of the early 20th century, so that doesn't apply to me, so I guess I'm not a poet. Or I read We Real Cool by Gwendolyn Brooks, and that's all of Brooks' work that I read, so it was like, I guess I'm just not this thing. I don't know how to become a poet. I don't know what a poet looks like. I don't know if there are contemporary Black poets. I just didn't really see myself under the subject heading or title of a poet. This same phenomenon happened for me as it related to performance art. When I thought about like, what is performance art? Who is a performance artist? What does a performance artist look like? I was thinking of myself as the antithesis of that. I was like, I've never done art in a gallery. I tried out for West Side Story my first year of high school and was rejected. I was not cast. So it was like, I'm not even a theater kid. Like I have no, like I don't have any drama training. I didn't do slam or spoken word coming up. So I was like, I don't have the tools. And I don't think I look like or embody what this would even be. And then that became connected to like, how do I make performance art? Can I be a performance artist? Like, can I actually be that? And do I look like a performance artist? If so, what does that mean? If not, how do I make myself look like what? Like I need to do these pieces. So I'm gonna need to figure out how to perform within the performance in a meta way, or like figure out a way to do this without making it look like these terms begin to bubble up in terms of your anxiety, like amateur, corny, over the top. Like I was like, how am I gonna do this right? Like I gotta come hard. It has to be good and polished and finished. So how am I going to go about doing this? So in my research, as I began to kind of think about the history of performance art, what it is that arguably defines a performance art piece, what kind of common attributes or processes are performance artists doing, three things kind of rose to the surface for me. So one is that performance artists are often imagining the body as a territory and a material that can be claimed and presented on its own terms. So that was a concept I do readings, I get up in front of people, I'm standing at a podium or microphone, I have my book, or I'm reading from my page, but I never really thought about my body as an actual material. I'm used to people in spaces sitting in the audience quietly, maybe they clap at the end. If they're really rowdy, maybe they say something, but there's a very clear demarcate. I stand at the front, I read, the audience is quiet, they sit, and then we clap, right? So I'm not really thinking of my body as a material, or even present, honestly, like even having any meaning, or it's just there. And then this focus on the body gives us the potential for rethinking the culture of art making. So for example, if I view my body itself as a performance space, what are ways I can make the text be vocalized or come alive on my actual flesh, or in terms of how I'm moving my body through a space, or in terms of where I'm situating my body in a space. If I was in that room standing like directly in front of Russell, like 2 centimeters from the face, pre-pandemic, like what does that mean in terms of my relationship to audience, how I've put my body in proximity to audience members. And then lastly, I found it really powerful to not really fetishize the live aspect necessarily, or the living body, but think more about concepts of changeability or instability, destabilization. Because what was really interesting is in performance art, I really am not in control. So there's a lot more improvisation, there's a lot more loss of control, there's a lot more unknowing on my part. I don't know how audiences are going to respond. I don't know what audiences are going to do. I don't know what people's facial expressions are going to be. There's just so many components that are kind of destabilized or unstable, which is very much for me in contrast to a formal reading in which I read and I'm in control and audience members behave in a certain way in relationship to me. Okay, let's see. Okay, wait one moment. Okay, is this still looking okay? Good, okay. So then I began to familiarize myself. Some folks I was already somewhat familiar with, but contemporary or modern examples of performance art and artists to begin my own little like, I'll call it like Mount Rushmore, like the folks that I kind of rock with, or the folks that I thought I would be in contention with, people that are building my own personal curated canon of performance art possibilities. Because once I began to build that, I began to get a sense of what things might I want to copy or mimic or expand or subvert or counter. So I began to rev up my possibility. And the very beautiful experience within this is that when you're in an area that you're not familiar with, it's like anything becomes possible. It's the magic somewhat of being like a child, just like this, I could do this or this or this or this. It really creates for me a very fertile lightness, I don't know how to, of possibility that really expands perhaps limits or rigidity of fields that we are familiar with. It's like, I've seen every type of poem. I know all about poetry. Like, I've seen all the latest poems. But then if I go into a different realm, if I go into performance art and I look at a Jared Bark piece, which is in this left corner, and they're performing with light bulbs affixed and attached to their body, some of which are illuminated with a mask, it's like, how can I make that happen in a stanza? Or how can I make that happen in an essay? Or how is metaphor functioning in this piece that is fresh and new and creative and not cliche that I could translate back into my writing? And vice versa. How could I take an image or a piece of metaphor from my writing and literally animate it, bring it to life? Because I was talking yesterday in our workshop about when we print on the page, it's a flat plane. But I'm always actually reaching for at least a 3-dimensional experience. So we build worlds with language that are then flattened by the plane of the page. And I'm arguing or suggesting that in performance art, we literally are breathing, animating, creating a multi-dimensional experience that's textured in a variety of different layers. And so then the beautiful challenge was, how do I do that on the page with language? Like knowing the limits of language itself or creative writing as a genre, how do I get these to talk to each other, to communicate with each other in terms of how I'm making and then sharing with audience members, with listeners, with readers? Okay, so I wanted to just briefly kind of cover some things that were revelatory to me in the hopes that I don't know, they'll be revelatory to you. So if I was there on our day off, which is kind of not really a day off, but on our day off, I would be like, okay, we're gonna meet in that like common area at PNCA when you first enter something beneath the stairs by the library. And we're just gonna do the performance art pieces. Like we'll just have a list of names. Each person will get up, do their piece. no questions asked, no explanation, we'll just rock with it. So maybe y'all, the brave of you that are there, if you want to do this, you can actually bring this into fruition. So some things I would consider are ways to focus on embodiment, considerations of your body and bodily movement. Maybe you would have a few rehearsals. So often in formal readings, I'll do like a mic check just to make sure the microphone literally works, or a Zoom check to make sure my internet works. But I didn't come from a culture of having rehearsals or developing a choreography. I might have a reading list or know what I want to read, but I often don't think about choreographing my readings or choreographing how I'm being in a space. You might think about props or the use of masks, the use of objects to enhance your piece. So these images on the right are masks that I constructed from paper. And I was living this past year in a really small apartment. So I did most of my work on a TV tray table, which was like the dimensions of my actual laptop. So I had very little space and like a little bit of walking room around my bed. So in this scale of a small room, I was trying to make really big objects like metalwork and performance art. So my roommates, my metalwork pieces ended up living under our kitchen table, which was very dangerous because they're sharp and large and often were didn't have finished surfaces or smooth surfaces. So I had these dangerous sharp objects like chilling throughout our living room and kitchen, making it kind of uninhabitable. And then I was making these large scale masks from paper in my actual room. I wish they're in Providence right now. I wish I had them because I would read tonight even with one of them on. But I was able to make them through folding pieces of paper in small scale and then gluing them together. So it really got me thinking. And for those that came to my talk in the talk in the spring about scale of things, like there's something really interesting that happens when you pivot from, I know even if I just have a piece of receipt paper or an index card, that I can write what I need to in that shape or size or those parameters. But when it came to building something to wear on my head, as you see in this image, it needs to be big. So now I've got to find big pieces of paper. I've got to store this somewhere. Like I don't have a studio, so where am I storing these objects? Like so then all these new concerns arise in terms of materials and process and making. Some other considerations were for sound, music, use of space. Like, I think Jay sometimes asks, like, do you have a song that you want us to play before you're reading? Or is there like sometimes, certain venues will be like, you can make a playlist or something, we'll play your songs. But I've never thought about having musical accompaniment or a playlist that plays in the background or songs I want people to listen to before or after my reading, or thinking about the use of music in conversation with my work was something new for me. And learning how to use music design software. So learning how to actually use tools for actual like music makers or people that formally create and craft music. And then lastly, there were moments when I would literally have instructions for my audience. So come in, sit down, don't touch anything, cross your like actual instructions. And without fail, whatever it is in an art context, people don't listen. Like some of them listen, but it's like you could be like, I perfectly gave you all the I told y'all to sit down. And there would be without fail at least one or two people that would deviate from what I said to do. And so that was really powerful because it was like, wow, when I write a poem or write an essay and someone reads it, I mean, they're reading it, but I don't really get to see or witness their process of reading it, or I maybe kind of have little control, but in the performance art space, I was like, I got to actually watch people be defiant, like watch people be disobedient, like watch people be like, I'm bored, I'm yawning, or I'm rolling my eyes, I'm tired, I'm scared for you, Allison. Like I got to actually witness and have a collaborative experience with audience members in real time, which was scary, but also really powerful because I had never quite had that level of interconnection with audience before. Okay, so this is just some other concepts, and I'm really looking forward to V's talk, and I think Alejandro touched on this as well. It's really beautiful also to have it be a collaborative experience. That could be with the natural world, that could be with the space, that could be with your classmates. Like I did a collaborative performance with one of the fiction writers, and I got to go to her house and pet her dogs, and we talked about what we were going to do. Like it just created a different level of exchange that I often don't find or see encouraged necessarily in creative writing, especially as it relates to attribution or to credit. Like now I have to credit this other person, or there's tends to be anxiety or sometimes tension surrounding who's the owner of that thing or how. Whereas in the art space, I felt we could have an ephemeral experience, or we could create an event together, and there wasn't as much tension or fraughtness surrounding who owns it or who's responsible for what. It was kind of a jazz, improvisational, spontaneous, organic kind of it's co-experience, if that makes sense. Okay, and then I included this slide at the last minute last night, also kind of inspired by Alejandro's talk, because I couldn't remember it's in my home in Providence, the collection of short stories that this epigraph appears at the beginning of. But the epigraph is, there's no such thing as communication. There are only two things. There is a successful miscommunication and unsuccessful miscommunication. And when you have unsuccessful miscommunication, you are having a good time. And so I felt that this was a pretty freeing way to enter the space of trying to present pieces or work where I didn't know what I was doing, because it was like, okay, if there's really no such thing as communicating, it's just like all miscommunication, and you can either do it successfully or unsuccessfully. But I'm trying to rock out with the good time. Like I want to have fun. I want to have a good time. I want people to enjoy the experience. I want to enjoy the experience. So we'll just rock with unsuccessful miscommunication. And so that really turned the tables in an Ivy League academic space of graduate school to, I'm interested in unsuccessful miscommunications rather than perfection, understanding, everybody getting it, me looking good and professional. Like it kind of rewrote the rules for me, at least mentally, and I'm sure probably also physiologically, in terms of the making experience. All right, so I wanted to include for you all an example just so you could see what I meant by the three-way dictionary. So this is like an excerpt, a screenshot of mine. So I had metalwork, performance art, and poetry alongside each other. So for example, plasma cutting is a process that cuts through electrically conductive materials by means of an accelerated jet of hot plasma. It's very sexy. It was like really fun. And then in performance art, an end scene or cut is the conclusion of a scene or the end of action. And then in poetry, line break is the termination of the line of a poem and the beginning of a new line. So to me, those all began to kind of sit together in terms of being interchangeable across these fields, and changed my relationship to labor, to physical labor. What I mean by that is when I hit the return button on my computer, it requires fairly little effort. I just press the button. When I need to create a severing or a space or a cut, a new space in a piece of steel, depending on the thickness of the steel, that requires me to have a knowledge of chemistry, have the knowledge of like how to handle and protect my body from the heat of the tools, heating things to thousands of degrees Fahrenheit. After I've heated it and made the cut, I need to let it cool before it burns through my skin. Like there are all these different components necessary in terms of safety, in terms of knowledge. And so it really made me be like, when I hit enter on my computer, when I hit return, that's easy. It's new paragraph, new paragraph, new paragraph. So it was informed by this notion of, in other fields, there are different types of labor difficulty. And to have play with what is hard, what is easy, what requires a lot of knowledge, what doesn't, created a lot of room for me to explore and experiment, really, in ways that were quite interesting. Okay, like just like a hinge, for example, to make a hinge out of metal is actually really fucking hard. So we never did that, but it was very difficult. All right, so then I want to share my love for Swallow the Fish. So simultaneous to the foreign home class, I was taking poetry workshop, which did actually have a syllabus and required readings. And on that list of readings was Gabrielle Civil's Swallow the Fish, a book that I owned. I have a lot of Civil's work, but had not actually read any of it, Story of My Life. So I started to read it in the context of the poetry workshop, not in the context of my foreign home class. And I just was like falling in love with it as almost like a spiritual text. I was like, this book has found me when I needed it to find me, and it's communing with me. It's communicating with me. It is doing things I didn't think were possible in terms of kind of genre bending. And it continues to open these portals or holes for me in terms of possibility that I can't quite explain. So I've collected some different quotes or pieces from it that I think are helpful, that I'd love to think through with y'all. And then I just wanted to read for you the section, some tidbits of it that come from the title Swallow the Fish and what swallow the fish means, so that you can think about this kind of mantra or approach post my talk. Okay, so the book is defined as like this kind of hybrid, a memoir and performance art, that I feel like is a really limiting description, because I think it's way more than that, but a memoir. And it offers the interiority of my performances, Civil says. The book aims to make the invisible parts of performance visible. It also highlights how much writing is a part of performance for me. Even if I'm not speaking in a performance, or if it seems like there is no text, for me, there's always text. The text is my body, and there's always writing. And so this became really interesting to me again, this notion of the text as body, the body as always being present, and thereby a text always being present. Is a body a type of writing or form of writing? Is it a piece that we inherit? Like, I didn't write this body, I got it, like it was given to me, I inherited it. But what level of authority or collaboration does that grant me? Like, how do I view the body as an actual text? Okay, so I'm gonna read for y'all the section that's discussing Swallow the Fish. Then maybe I'll stop so we can do questions or check in. All right. So this is a conversation that Civil is a part of with some friends that are thinking about this artist Murray doing an exhibition. So I'm doing a thing at Patrick's, Mary was saying. I know there are hooks and water, but I'm trying to figure out the part with the fish. Fish? Flavia asked. Your piece is about fish? No, it's about other things. I was thinking about having a goldfish swimming in a bowl while I did the first part, then maybe do a thing with a rope and hooks or a knife, and then do something that transforms the fish, changes it. Ooh, a goldfish, I said. Lines from Rita Dove's Dusting popped into my head. The clear bowl with one bright fish rippling wound, or wound to rhyme with around. I like it. Could you pour the fish from the bowl into a pitcher or something? Or you could start with the pitcher, Flavia suggested. Then you could drink from the water. I think I need to do more than just sip the water. It needs to be a more powerful gesture. Swallow the fish, Colin said. That's what you know you want to do. It's small and biodegradable. Eat a goldfish, Evie interjected, eyebrows raised. You don't need to eat it, Colin continued, or chew it or anything. Just swallow it. Colin, Flavia fussed. Mireille can't hurt animals for her art. That's not right. Flavia's crickets had chirped blithely unharmed, and she'd released them all at the end of her show. She doesn't need to hurt it, just swallow it. And if it's necessary for the piece, then she needs to do it. Is it necessary? I asked, repulsed yet titillated by the idea. Swallow the fish. The whole thing had a New Jack, lyrical, black radical appeal, but was also old school performance art. Dramatic and crazy and slightly dangerous, art at the level of life and death, embodying the natural kingdom. Something indulgent and a little mean, but tapping into another kind of power. Breaking taboos, dancing the fine line between crazy and brilliant. Feeling something alien and alive move from transparency into your body, fish rippling, wound or wound. But who would really do this? Mary responded. Swallow the fish. I had never thought of myself as a fearful person, but performance art made me confront my fears and also my desires. At the start, not the question, what would a performance artist do? Because the answer was everything, anything. At the start, this question, who got to do those things? Who got to be a performance artist? Which people in which bodies? To swallow the fish, you had to have something more than a reason. In a way, you had to reject reason itself. You had to have spirit, and perhaps spirits and the spirits too. Especially as a nice black girl, as a strong black woman. You couldn't just get away with whatever, hell no. You could be crucified for that or worse, gain a bad reputation. Animal murderer, race traitor, nasty girl, acting crazy, acting up, performing, anything could happen to you. Anything could happen. It couldn't be pretense or something to do for kicks. It had to be real. There had to be some black art, some power, some need and conviction that warranted that kind of transformation, a particular kind of magic. In the end, Mireille chose not to swallow the fish or even to use a goldfish in a bowl at all. She passed a bucket with a freshly caught trout through the audience, a hook still dangling from its lips. She told a story in the accent of fishermen displaced from his home, tying hooks into knots in a net. Then she masqueraded as a corporate raider with a clipboard, planning a new corporate development on the site. She only did the piece twice, one weekend at Patrick's Cabaret in Minneapolis, and hasn't revived it since. In the meantime, that goldfish, rippling wound or wound, the challenge to swallow it became mine. It belongs to anyone moving toward the form of performance art, struggling to figure out what it means, what is required to do it, what kind of body and spirit you would need. And so I'm trying to get out of the colonial violent language that a lot of learning is. I give you this problem, or here's a challenge. I'm recontextualizing it as an invitation, and asking you all, inviting you all to determine what the swallow the fish element of your work might be, or could be. If you were to orient yourself in relationship to fear in this way, if you were to orient yourself in relationship to standing at the boundaries of your knowing, your proficiency, your credentialing, and take a step forward. And invite audience members, invite the natural world, invite the animal kingdom, invite all senses of beings and spirits to engage on that interaction, that journey, that process with you, what might take place. So I'm going to stop sharing there. There's some more juicy tidbits of interesting quotes from the book in relationship to different types of aspects, and then a post-talk activity. But I wanted to leave some room did I do this accurately? Okay, 10 minutes to engage or hear feedback, thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, to have an exchange. Oh, I love this. Thank you, Alejandro. I take your cosign. I literally translation terrifies me. So successful mistranslation versus unsuccessful mistranslation. Love. It's an interesting approach even to think about workshop. If writers submit work to workshop for us to read, we're all arguably going to be mistranslating. So we're either successfully mistranslating or maybe unsuccessfully mistranslating. But I can't get inside of each of the voices in you all's head. I can't get right. Like there's always slippage. There's always gaps. There's always holes. But in the extension of the work, we provide a bridge. And to alleviate the kind of pressure or the need for perfection, for the illusion really of perfection, mistranslation and miscommunication kind of allow me to do that. Lydia May asked, did you end up cheating, lying, stealing for the medal work? For my first piece I did, I had a mask that's made from gold that like fashion designer, jewelry designer made for one of my friends that's a musician. So I brought that in and was like, look, I made this. And then from then on, I did learn how to do metalwork. Like I said, the pieces weren't really the best, but it created a frenzied type dynamic, which I don't suggest for you all. I wish that wasn't my experience, but I would spend weekends at the steel yard in Providence working with like union laborers. So like working with people that were often very generous and kind and willing to help me. And so the experience of showing up in like my Black queer female body into a space with carpenters, people that are building things to functionally work on track, like to actually functionally work to do labor, being like, what are you working on? I'm like, I'm trying to make some art pieces. I'm trying to make some performance art body wear. Like it was a very interesting exchange. And many things I've done in my life and art practice, often I'm kind of the oddball. I'm the person that everyone's like, why are you here? Or kind of confused. So if I can get over my own fear of being unknown in that space or also confused as to why I'm there, then really interesting things tend to happen. So if you go to my website on the artist tab, I have some documentation, both like footage through video and pictures of some of the things I did actually did make that are mine. And then Jason said, an interaction with boundaries that appear beyond us and how to press, transform oneself through the exploration of those boundaries, exposure and growth. I continue to hear that I should explore, but I don't want to explore. And this created a resistance. Just my current thoughts go. Yeah. Boundaries that appear beyond us and how to press, transform those boundaries, exposure and growth. Yeah. Boundaries. It sounds so simple, but boundaries are very delicate things that require a lot of maintenance, culture, like the concepts of them, the physical representations of them. If you let go, or if you see the boundary as porous, what might happen through exposure and growth? Yeah. So much of our culture also values the opposite of that, especially formal education, like risks, failure, trying something new. Those are often not things rewarded or often valued. And so we're often having to unlearn or do some serious, even emotional labor to take risks or weigh the consequences, weigh what that will actually mean and look like, which is important work.
Hey, Allison, I got just a quick question. I'm just thinking too about the Red Curator that you were read this last residency and the performative aspects there. Just sort of, I wonder, I'm curious if when the performance started, and I know that was also engaging Dion Brands, the blue clerk, but I'm just wondering when the sort of your your work with some of this started then engaging your poetry practice? Like how quick that was, or do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, thanks. So I think I started working on the Red Curator in the early fall. I read, which I'll do tonight. I always try to read something in process because I feel like PNCA gives good juju to my work that's like trying to figure itself out. So I read that at the winter residency. So I hadn't taken this class yet, this class in which I did performance art and metalwork. And what ended up happening is I was like, how can I build? Now I'm like, so this manuscript for the new people in our program, it's a curator and an artist that are living and talking inside of a wolf. They live together in the belly of a wolf, and it's red. The entire landscape is red. So then I was like, how can I build an actual three-dimensional structure? So I'm either probably through paper, or if I can figure out some crude type of taxidermy, going to build a structure, like in the vein of Kiki Smith, like some type of sculptural work that's a wolf, to stage it in. And I met with, I think it's Brian Selznick. He did like the illustrations for Frindle and like Hugo and some of the Harry Potter titles. He was like, why don't you start making just like mini puppet show, like little tiny caricatures. So I'm also going to try to create a wolf space and actually make a puppet show. Um, yeah, like previously I was just trying to make the work come to life in words, which for me was like, I'll make it like a play. It's a play, poem, novel. It's Anne Carson, it's that. So I was honestly limited to that. And then after this class, it was like, okay, maybe it's actually like a puppet show. Like I like puppet show, like puppet shows, like, or maybe it's something like, so then let me tease the limits of my animation capacity. Like, what would it mean if I met with an animator and talked to them about how I would animate? Like, I will begin to craft or make from clay or Play-Doh, like begin to actually build the wolf, build the people inside the wolf, build the rib cage that is shell. Like, I'm actually now thinking about ways, even if I don't publish that or it doesn't live publicly, but like, literally make the thing. I think that answered your question. I'm so sorry. I think that answered.
It did, yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you, Allison. That was awesome.
Allison?
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. Two things. One, do you feel that, or were you invited back to the yard to work metal again in the future? And as you were building the hinge and with the heating and the hammering as it rolled, is that something that you felt like could be an intense focus for you again, and applying that to your writing and your other crafts?
Yeah, so to your first question, Russell, I have been invited back. It was actually a very warm space and I think very collaborative and fulfilling for both parties, for the union laborer and myself as artists. And it was actually a very warm space. Like people wanted to help me, wanted to support my endeavors. So yeah, I'll hopefully continue to work in the space this year coming up. And your reference, I think, to like blacksmithing, the process of hammering or over open fire, I do think it has, I think you used the term meditative, or maybe I'm projecting that. I think certain physical processes or different types of labor, I guess, have a meditative quality. And I think that is an actual ritual or process that I do continue and hope to draw from for my creative writing process. A more expansive concept always of what writing is. Like if I'm building with metal, if I'm like learning alongside a butcher how to cut certain types of meat, like that's still part of writing poetry. Like it's all also part of the writing process.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have a question, Alejandro? Or I don't?
Yeah. I guess I'll make it brief. It's maybe more of a comment on your exchange with Jason, which is just to say that I think another word that's interesting to put in here when one thinks about as Jason put it, exploring what you don't want to explore. And to go back to the remark about miscommunication that I like is the notion of competence, right? I think when one can think of oneself as competent at doing something, and that's itself a kind of block or limit that one doesn't recognize as such, because there's a space of familiarity. Like, I think I know how to do this, and exploring seems like stepping out of that comfort. But I think one can think about it the other way around, right? That you have to reevaluate your sense of your own competence. I mean, that doesn't mean you should, have a collapse in self-esteem, but to continue to challenge yourself. Maybe you don't like the word challenge there, Alison, but to continue to provoke yourself. And I think competence is one of those notions that is imported in a peculiar way into creative work. I don't know how you feel about that word in particular in this context.
It's interesting that you raise competence, because the framing of the first class, Talia kept emphasizing two analogies. One being a person who literally travels to a country in which they don't know the language. So you begin, like, you use gestures, or you're pointing to things, or you learn a few key words to get basic things, or you feel kind of afraid or frustrated, or it takes a lot of energy. And then as you begin to acquire language skills, develop competency, all those feelings shift and change until you do it again, right? Like that freshness. We also use the analogy of, like, if you are first like dating or seeing someone intimately, romantically, like the feeling and quality of attraction is so hard to replicate after you've been in a relationship arguably for 10 years or something, or this person like the back of, like, I spend day in and day out with this person, so the feeling I got when I first saw them across the room in the bar, so like that particular quality, texture of feel is almost impossible to replicate. But that like texture feel is what I'm always reaching for in the work and my practice. Like that like, it's cliche, but like that passion, that fire is like hard to get back. So yeah, maybe it ties in with Jason's point, like there's a limit to the unique within comfort. Like when you're comfortable with someone as your partner, then sometimes that uniqueness, that unknowing, that mystery, that drama is often not present, right? So you have to try to replicate it or fabricate it.
Right. But I mean, if I could just respond, what the two situations have in common is that no one wants to be taken for granted. You don't want to be taken for granted the minute you meet somebody, and you don't want to be taken for granted 10 years into a relationship, right? So that sense of like, there's still like chasing after the spark may change in modality, but it's still what is held in common.
Damn. That was deep. I'm not gonna lie, Alejandro, that was bars. I'm gonna have to marinate on that. So no, because that's real. That's some real life. So yeah, the chasing the spark, but not wanting to be taken for granted. What does it mean to take the word? Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that conceptually, both in like life and practice, like creative practice.
I just had something that came up for me. Just listening to all of you guys, it made me think about, in the handout, Alison, you sent out, there's a part that says the practice of being in the world. Art of all kinds is not just the practice of making, it's the practice of being in the world in a certain way. And that makes me think so much about what you guys are talking about, even in just like relationships, but also just as an artist and as a maker, that it's not just about making something, it's about like the way that we experience the world, the way that we continue to really just, I guess, be curious. And I think that can be applied to relationships and to just the way that we experience life in general. And I think that the idea of allowing ourselves to, for me, also, there's so much fear around thinking of myself as an amateur. But I think that there's something so beautiful about that, because then it's like we're open to receiving so much. And if we can, I think as artists, connect that experience just to our, mundane everyday life, that can just kind of open up a lot. So that just made me think about.
And I love that you shared that holding your child, because I think Alejandro even referenced, maybe I'm mistaken, children yesterday, like children not being as invested in the meaning of work. Like the amateur childlike sensibility is the one I'm actually reaching for. Like I'd love to workshop with 5-year-olds. Like they just don't have like the socialization we do. So they're already in that space. Like I think that's absolutely correct. Like a more expansive, to your point, and I appreciate your close reading in that way of being in the world, and then the amateur, to use your phrasing, the childlike state, the novice state, like is, to me, there's something very special about that realm.
And I'll never forget, like when you talked about just being fascinated with researching insects. I think it was in like the first residency. That's always just stuck with me, and it's always just inspired me to be like, just research anything, make it an adventure, make it something where it's not like, because there's this idea of research of just like this burden, this responsibility, this obligation. But you've inspired me so much to just look at it in a different way. And so thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you. The inspiration's mutual. And I think Alejandro's living practice also of collaborating across space and time, also like with using technology, using different mediums, like that collaboration, that research process can look a variety of different ways also. Okay, I don't want to cut into like snack time, hydration time. Also, I know it's like hard in downtown Portland to eat quickly or grab food, so I don't, there's one more comment, Jay, or should we, because so we have.
Yeah, no, let's give Alison a hand. Thank you, Alison. That's so great. It's such a great class. Really amazing class. And I'm about to text you some puppet show stuff. I'm really into them too. All right, so we have workshop at 11, and we have about an hour. So we'll see y'all.